joint medical programs, there's biomed, there's direct entry, you can go into state.
There's so many pathways to get into medicine straight out of year 12, and that's your only option.
Sithuli, it's so great to have you here. Thank you so much for coming in. I'm really looking forward to this next episode. Generally, the last few episodes, we've worked chronologically through, gone through some sort of year 12 experience, and then also talked through your journey into medical school. But I'm keen to work backwards with you today, and I'm really keen to start off and hear a bit about your current place in uni. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm studying medicine as part of the regional medical pathway. So it's like the joint medical program between Central Queensland University and the University of Queensland. It's been really good so far. I'm located in Bundaberg, so I moved from Melbourne. So that was definitely the highlight of my med journey so far.
Okay. And so what has been the highlight of, I guess, that joint medical program so far?
I think the biggest highlight has been that regional experience. You know, I've heard a lot about what regional medicine hospitals are like, but I've never seen it in real life. So being able to kind of see the town, see the people and how everything works together has been definitely the highlight.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a really great time on my own real placement actually last year. So I'm sure that there's some good experiences to draw on there. Now, in terms of your journey into that joint medical program, I'm sure that was a little bit different from some of the others that I've spoken to previously. Now, just giving a bit of insight, because I'm not sure as well, but so what does a joint medical program actually look like for you in the next few years?
Yeah, so my course alone is 7 years long. The first 3 years is Bachelor of Medical Science, and then the next 4 years will be Doctor of Medicine. So it's called the Provisional Entry Pathway, and it pretty much works the same way as the UQ program works as well. So I've applied from Melbourne and I just happened to get in, so that's how I got in.
Okay. And what's it been like moving away from home, moving all the way up north to Queensland?
Yeah, it was definitely very difficult because I am the only child, so I never really pictured a life away from home. I mean, I've always wanted to study medicine, but sort of in the comfort of being with my family. So I think at the start, I definitely had moments where I wasn't even sure where I wanted to go, things like that. But I think after I moved, I've realized, in a way, everything happens for the best. I think I've grown to be very independent in a lot of ways, living completely away from home, but also being able to travel back home by myself. So I think it's been really good so far.
Okay. And how often are you coming back home?
Probably too much more than I should. Our uni the first 3 years is pretty flexible, so I do get a lot of holidays. So I try to come back at least once a month-ish, and then my first year ended in October. So I've been home since then. It's about 5 months. So it's been pretty good, that balance. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, it sounds really, really good, and I suppose it's nice as well to have all that time to explore some other interests. Now, you're working in Contour at the moment, and a lot of the students watching this actually won't know necessarily how much you've impacted them if you haven't had a direct conversation with them. But can you tell me a bit about your role at Contour?
Yeah, so I actually have 2 roles at Contour. I work with the UCAT course, and I also work with the medical admissions team. So with the UCAT course, I do a lot of like the welcome consultations and contacting students in that way. So that's been really good. But I also do like the medical admissions part, which is where we did a lot of consultations, just kind of see, okay, these are your options with your UCAT score. And then more recently, since offer rounds and everything has finished, I've been doing a lot of like post-offer calls. It's been really exciting to see a lot of the students that I, gave advice to actually get into medicine and tell me, oh, these are the interviews I did, these are the offers I got. But then also it's been good to support the students who, didn't necessarily get in. So a bit of both, but I think I've really enjoyed the job at Contour so far.
Awesome. Now, as someone who's done this joint medical program that you're in at the moment, was that your first pick for medical school? Or would that have been your first pick retrospectively?
Definitely not. I would say I wanted to stay close to home. So my first pick was definitely Monash, which I did an interview for as well. But, we never really get to pick where we go. So I did 2 interviews, so Monash and Central Queensland. And I didn't get the Monash offer in the end, and I got the Central Queensland offer. And there was like, a weekend before where I didn't get, so the Friday was when the Monash interviews actually, like the offers came out.
Yep.
And then we had a weekend, and then the Queensland offers came out. So that weekend was like the most stressful weekend of my life, I think, because, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really didn't want to do my second preference course, which is biomed.
Okay.
And when the offer did come on Monday, I think I valued it a lot more than I would have probably if I'd gotten it before. I really wanted med at that point. So that's pretty much how I got to the CQU course. But yeah, definitely not first preference at the start.
Okay. Oh, well, that's really great that you've got that experience to actually share with in med admissions and go, when you're on the phone, it's not just, hey, I know how you feel. It's actually, I do know how you feel. And I'm sure that was challenging at the time. But again, I'm really, really glad that that's a pathway that you're on. And I hope that it's exciting and it gives you a lot to work with it throughout the years. Now, in med admissions, for anyone who might actually be at that stage at the moment where they may have got the offer that they wanted or maybe not so much, is there any particular advice that you might share with them? Obviously, you would have had a few conversations already, but from your own experience and just generally, what advice might you offer those students?
I think generally what I've always said is it's more so focused towards the students who didn't particularly get their first preference. And it's just that if you do want to do med, like I really, really wanted to do med. And I think location doesn't really matter in that way, or time doesn't really matter either. So I think what we've noticed with the consultations as well is there's so many pathways to get into medicine. It's not necessarily like, you do straight out of year 12 and that's your only option. It's like there's so many pathways. So if you're someone who didn't get your first preference, then I think, don't stress about it too much. But also, if you're someone who did get your first preference, then it's a really exciting time. So, I've been getting a lot of questions about how med works, especially a lot of students joining me in CQU this year. So it's been really exciting to say, this is what you can sort of look forward to and just make the most of your offer, I guess, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember back in my sort of year 12 time, it would have been about October, November, there were those conversations going around. There's lots of different pathways. The offers hadn't come out yet, and there's stress around the MMI, there's stress around different offers. And I think it's really, really true. It's not just something we throw around, there are so many different pathways. There's joint medical programs, there's biomed, there's direct entry. You can go into state, you can go overseas. I've got a friend who went over to America actually, and sort of went through a Princeton sort of pathway. I don't know how he managed that at all, but there are so many different pathways, and it's really, really exciting for people who, maybe there's some disappointment, but it's also really exciting for them. Now, your other role as well, so UCAT tutoring and sort of consultations as well.
Consultations. I work more with the sales team. So a lot of consultations we run for incoming students who know nothing about the UCAT. So that's also been a really cool experience because I think I was someone who found out about the UCAT quite late on. No one from my family had done the med process in Australia, and just being able to kind of say, okay, this is what you can look forward to, and this is when you should be starting prep. I really enjoy that role because, you're talking to someone who really wants to get into med but has no idea how to get in. So just being able to kind of say the process and kind of tell them about the UCAT, it's been really interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you started the UCAT quite late. When would you say you started your preparation for that?
Yeah, I mean, my goal was to start towards the start of year 12, so around the holidays, that sort of period. But, with year 12 starting and the excitement of my subjects and everything, it was kind of taking a back seat, unfortunately. I also didn't really know the importance of the UCAT back then. So I didn't know that, ATAR and UCAT were pretty much weighted the same. Yeah. I always thought ATAR was the most important thing. UCAT, if it works out, it works out. Otherwise, I always thought there was another way into med. But I think I've only really realized how difficult the UCAT was and that I needed to spend time on it around, the March, April school holidays. So that's when I started to stress out. I was telling my mom, I don't know how to prepare. This isn't working. My scores were always, 2,600, 2,700, not going up. So it was really stressful. And then I started to kind of put some UCAT prep into my school schedule and everything every day. And it just kind of went uphill from there, which was quite good, yeah.
Awesome. I think, when did I start my preparation? It would have been too late as well, I think. And I had a very similar experience with the scores. Didn't feel like they were going up, and there was lots going on at school. And like you said, when you don't know how much the UCAT's weighted, you kind of just put it on the back burner, and I think that was my own experience. And then walking into the last 6 months of year 12, or I suppose it's about 4 months, maybe there's a score that you didn't want so much, and a bit of disappointment there, and you kind of call your way back. That was definitely my experience. Now, if we center in sort of on that UCAT preparation a bit, of course, those last 2 weeks with some mindset sort of stuff with Contour was really great. But what would be one key tip that you might offer some students for their own UCAT preparation besides just start early?
Yeah, definitely start early. But other than that, I think the main thing is stress is a big factor in the UCAT. I can say it really, really affected me. The fact that your scores don't necessarily go up, you don't really do much of it outside of school, like outside of like the house, I guess. So you get really comfortable doing it in your room by yourself. But when you go to the actual exam room, it's quite stressful. So definitely doing a few things to manage your stress. So, in terms of like mindset, keeping yourself really calm, priming a little bit before the exam, I think that goes a really long way. And I think that's what kind of got me over the line from, like a 2,600 to over 3,000.
Oh, wow.
It was a huge improvement. I think I started really, really low and my final score was 3,100. So,
Very good.
I obviously would have liked it to be a little bit higher, but given the time I had, I was quite proud of like how much I had come in that time. So definitely I think stress and like being able to manage yourself in that environment is the biggest thing you can do to help yourself. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any friends actually that were doing the UCAT as well?
Yeah, so I went to selective entry high school, so I went to Macrob in the city. So a lot of my friends are actually aiming for med, which was helpful in a way because when we talked about what are you doing this week? Like, are you focusing on abstract reasoning, verbal reasoning, that sort of thing? It definitely motivated me. So quite a few of my friends were aiming for med.
And did that evolve into more of like a competitive environment or instructive, would you say?
A bit of both, honestly. I think as much as possible, I tried to steer myself out of the competitive environment. I don't really perform too well in the competitive environment. I like to use it as like, okay, these are what my friends are doing, and I should use that as like a motivation to kind of perform like them, that sort of thing. I didn't like talking about scores and things too much when I was in school. I think I was very much so like I like to study alone. I like to kind of improve and like see my progress by myself as well. But when you go to a selective entry high school, I think anyone who's been can kind of relate to this. It's very hard to kind of stay out of. You kind of do get absorbed into all the competition and everything. So it was a bit of both, but I think I handled it hopefully quite well. Yeah.
One of the big things I've noticed with the UCAT is that you, unlike say an English exam or any other VCE or QC or whatever exams, the UCAT has dates from July through, is it June through August?
July through August.
July through August. So it's a long time. And what I found as well is that attitude of competition and things gets worse because some friends of yours will sit it in early July and yours sit late August. Yeah. And you've got to sit there going, oh, this person got this person got this, I'm getting this. And one of my best friends did his UCAT before me. We're really good friends, but it's of course a factor. And when there's only a couple of people that in the year level that have actually done the UCAT, in my case, I only knew maybe 3 or 4 that were trying, or at least publicly. And to know their scores before you walk in, and if they're higher or if they're lower, it's sort of navigating that conversation. I find that quite challenging. Looking back, if you had to change one thing about your preparation, I know that this links quite closely with a piece of advice. Is there something that you would have done differently?
In terms of what I would have done differently with my UCAT prep, I think, definitely giving myself a little bit of an earlier start. So around year 11, being able to kind of get onto preparation, but also probably talking to a few people who are in medicine already. I personally didn't really know many people, but if I could have reached out and maybe asked a little bit more advice on like how I should be going about the process, I think that would have really helped and been a good motivation as well. So definitely just looking into medicine, my options of medicine a little bit earlier, I think would have motivated me to start earlier as well.
Great. No, that's really, really good. Did you actually have any other angles that you wanted to take with uni? Any other pathways that you were considering besides medicine?
Yeah, for quite a long time, it's been very much so like healthcare focused. Okay. So I knew that one day, like didn't have to be medicine, but something in the healthcare field was definitely what I wanted to go down. Like science, that sort of field. So I did consider like the biomed pathway, do some research, that side of things as well. But I really didn't want to sit in front of a computer, do research all day, that sort of thing. So I was more focused on like a people-centered sort of job. So I looked at like dentistry, medicine, that sort of thing. But they were both very competitive. Yep. So I think the fact that I didn't have a backup was my main problem in year 12. It was going to be like doing science or biomed, do something open-ended, and then figuring it out later on. But yeah, something within health for sure.
Awesome. Oh, it's good to, really good to have a solid goal. I remember talking to another friend of mine actually, and he was really keen on the healthcare side of things, but a similar sort of experience that had to take a bit of a different pathway. And one of the wonderful things about doing provisional pathways, about taking biomed or science, is that there's, at least if I speak just on behalf of Melbourne Uni, there's the offering of breadth subjects. At Monash you can do a double degree. I'm sure in Queensland there's a lot of different offers as well. But it's a really nice way to explore. You can do biomedical engineering, you can do all different sort of pathways in the healthcare sector that aren't just directly medicine as well. All right, so you mentioned that in your UCAT preparation that, part of the reason why it was put on the back burner a little bit was because you were excited about your year 12 subjects. So what did you do in year 12?
Yeah, so in year 12, well, I did 2 in year 11. So I did biology and accounting in year 11, which I think was pretty lucky. Most schools now don't let you do 2 subjects. So that definitely weighed a lot of weight off my shoulders, actually. And then in year 12, I did English mainstream. And then I did methods, so maths methods, specialist maths, and not accounting. I did chemistry.
Chemistry.
Yeah.
Because of course chemistry would be a prerequisite. I'm always surprised that bio is not a prereq, given how much bio we actually do. But sure. I'm not sure how your experience has been. So doing 2 subjects in year 11 is a big deal. Yeah. And I mean, did you walk out of year 11 happy with those results?
Honestly, I did. Yep. I think I was really nervous. I didn't know what to expect, but my 2 year 11 subjects actually happened to be 2 of my highest scoring subjects, I think. But that was also because in year 12, most of my focus ended up going to UCAT, in the middle of the year, and that was where most of the SACs and everything happened. But like with it all, I think year 11, I definitely didn't know what I was doing. I was kind of just walking in the dark, just doing practice exams here and there. Biology I really enjoyed, but accounting was something I chose just to explore a new subject, just to see if I wanted to go down that pathway. But both of them ended up being pretty enjoyable, yeah.
And decided against accounting, I guess, in the end?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but I decided not for me.
Yeah. I think it's a great subject for actually year 11. There's a good handful of subjects that I think were really, really good as 3-4s. Sort of the psych, bizman, accounting, people do it quite often. And bio as well is another big one. So I'm really glad that you walked out of that. I was speaking with Ethan actually in a previous episode. We were talking about year 11 subjects, and we both agreed that we sort of just hit it with brute force in terms of like just do as many SACs as possible, as many exams as possible, and I imagine that would have compounded with 2 subjects as well. So really, really glad that you walked into year 12 having 2 really high subjects in the back pocket. But how did your kind of study habits and goals and things change from year 11 walking into year 12?
I think the main thing that changed was in year 11, I pretty much put all my effort into 2 subjects, but I knew that going into year 12, I had 4 subjects and the UCAT. So a lot of time management wise, things had to change. I had a lot of time to procrastinate and then kind of just, think about it and then do a practice exam here and there. I knew that year 12 had to be very much more routine, more, okay, this is what I'm going to do on this day, that sort of thing. So the main thing that changed is I think my organizational skills. I realized, okay, it worked, but I only had 2 subjects. We have double the workload this year. So the main thing was just allocating time and deciding when to do what subject, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose a lot of people use different study skills as well. I mean, there's practice SACs, there's practice exams. We've spoken a lot in each of these episodes about active recall and all those kind of buzzwords and things. Did you lean into any of those particular strategies at all for your studies?
Yeah, I think for sure practice exams. I did quite a lot of practice stacks. I'm not really someone who likes to do like notes and things like that. I tried for year 11. It didn't quite work out for me. I think I just, I lost track halfway and then it's too hard to keep track of. So in the end, mostly for year 12, what I did was a lot of practice exams. So I started, like I think VCAR allows you to do like 10, 20 years beforehand.
True.
So what I did was I picked out like the questions that were like relevant to like the study design. And then I didn't do them timed or anything at the start. I just wanted to get used to the style of questions because most of our SACs at Macrob were actually in a VCAR style as well for the most part. So they went quite hand in hand. So that's what I did at the start. And then the more later exams I left towards more exam period to really get in the zone and timing and everything. Yeah.
Great. No, that sounds like a really, really good strategy. Now, in terms of actually picking the subjects you wanted to do, now, of course, had this end goal of medicine, end goal of healthcare. So chemistry is an absolute given. Clearly, you've got a sort of math science focus with all those special methods. I'm sure that would have been quite tough doing both in the same year. I did the same. How did you actually go about picking those subjects?
I think for the most part, I knew I liked science. I knew I liked maths. I didn't really enjoy English, but English you have to do. So I chose mainstream. And then since I had the med focus, I did do chemistry and methods. They're both prerequisites. And
That's a prerequisite.
for most part, like some unis, because I wanted to apply interstate as well, most unis do need methods. So other than that, the only one I was kind of unsure about is specialist maths. I didn't know, I really enjoyed maths, but I didn't know if it was too difficult, the scaling and everything. There's a lot to factor in, but in the end I did decide to take it on. And then bio, I honestly just enjoyed. I really, really like bio. And yeah, like accounting, I think that's the only one that was a little bit random to my mix. I watched like, a lot of YouTube videos and things where medical students were talking about which subjects they had done. So I took a lot of inspiration from that. And the only other subject was like physics, which I didn't really want to take on. It was another big workload. So I thought I wanted something a little bit more chill in a way, a little bit that I could do a little bit of prep, but not too much. So a lot of my friends are actually taking accounting. So I thought, why not give it a go? And I ended up like being like, oh, this is actually quite fun. So I skipped 1, 2 and went straight to 3, 4.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And like we said, great to walk away with a really good result as well. I found at the end of year 12 that a lot of my subjects actually flipped in terms of what I was expecting. The ones that I thought would be in the bottom of the top 4 ended up being at the top, and other way around. I guess that's how scaling goes. Sometimes the sort of subjects scale down, subjects up. Now, with those subjects, and similar to the UCAT, in sort of looking in retrospect, if you change anything, is there any subjects you would have not done and actually gone, I wish I didn't do that one, or I wish I'd chosen this one instead?
Yeah, not really, but also I think potentially with specialist maths, given the time I had to spend on it, I think a lot of the time, like chemistry and methods, I didn't spend much time on them because of how like time-consuming specialist maths was. So potentially, like I could have explored a few other subjects, but I honestly didn't have the time to think, oh, general maths, what other subjects do I have? And I didn't really know many other people who had done other subjects. So I think it's more common now. I could have done a little bit more like maybe health-focused subjects if I'm interested in that. But with that said, I think it was still okay. I still enjoyed it, but could potentially have explored a few others, yeah.
It's good to hear that, you were very, very happy with your subjects. And I think looking back and going, yeah, like I'm really happy with not only the ones that I chose, but also how I did in them is something that not everyone can say. But it's really good that you had a good positive experience walking out of year 12. Now, in amidst all that study, in amidst all the busyness, like you said, the UCAT's really stressful, thinking about med's really stressful, year 12 subjects are stressful, studying regardless of however much, what subjects you're doing or where you're going with your year 12 as well. What was your approach outside of study to, self-care, to taking care of yourself, to making sure you didn't get overly stressed?
My form of self-care mostly came in the form of like spending time with my family. So I'm pretty close with my parents, and before we see every weekend we'll do something, we'd go out. I go shopping like every weekend, and those are the things that I really didn't want to lose going into BC. So as much as possible, I tried to, keep the things I really like to do within my routine. I didn't want to sort of do study, and then you do Saturday, Sunday study, and then go back to school study. So that was a really good change for me, and my parents were really on board with that as well, because if they were going out, they didn't want to leave me at home, like just leave me to study, that sort of thing. So I think most of the time, on Saturday, I wouldn't really do much work. I'd pretty much just go out of the house, get some fresh air, get away from the books, everything, and then completely get in a different zone. And then that actually helps when you come back to your studies, because it feels like, oh, I've taken a break now. I should do, something now. But most of the time in year 12, I think if you do something you like to do, there's some form of guilt. I don't know. There's maybe I should be doing something. Maybe I should be preparing for that SAC. But I think, the main thing is you deserve it. So I tried to kind of think that way as much as possible.
Oh, well, I'm sure your parents have also found that difficult with you moving away now,
For sure.
losing that consistency. But that's really, really good to have that much time to spend. And unfortunately, I think it is one of the things that does, like some other hobbies and things, take a bit of a back burner sometimes, spending time with friends and family in year 12, just because it is so busy. So it's really good to keep that up. And alongside that, were there any other hobbies or interests or extracurriculars or anything outside of study that kept you busy or took your mind off study?
To be honest, I didn't do a lot of extracurriculars because my commute to school alone was an hour and a half to 2 hours every day in work away. So that took a lot of time. So our train to the city and then the tram. So because of that, by the time I left her, it was really early, and when I came back, it was quite late. So I really didn't have time to do much. So I think one of the regrets of year 12 is not being able to do a lot. I wish I could have, but realistically, I couldn't really do much.
Okay. And I mean, looking now into these at the moment or the next couple of years, is there anything that you sort of look back on year 12 when I wish I would have tried that you can try now?
I think for the most part, what I kind of do regret is being able to spend time with my friends and everything outside of school. You go into year 12 with the mindset, oh, after exams I can do this, after exams I can do that. But for me, I think I'm a good example. I moved halfway across the country after exams, and a lot of my friends are in Queensland, everywhere else. So I think one of the major things I would have changed is, trying to fit as much as you can into year 12, because that time doesn't really come again. So even extracurriculars, things like that, there's not really an opportunity. I try to get involved at uni, but other than that, there's not really much you can do. And even at uni, there's only very limited things you can do. So that's probably what I would change. I
was thinking recently about something quite interesting, a phrase that everything is your fault. So it's a bit of a tangent, but in regards to study habits, in regards to your social life, in regards to everything, and specifically, we'll bring it to the context of year 12 and maybe uni as well, that everything is your fault. I'm curious to hear what you think of that as a concept, that everything's kind of your fault.
Yeah, I think the main thing of that is coming out of year 12, you'll have a few regrets. I think, you might not get the ATAR you might not get a study score you wanted. And at the end of the day, I think what that means is, to me at least, is, you can't really blame anyone else for it. It's the way you studied, it's the way you allocated your time. So I think in a way, you can't really avoid that feeling. You always wish you had done that tiny bit better than you did, or you went to that one formal that you didn't go to, that sort of thing. So in a way, I think it's sort of how you kind of allocate your own time. So yeah.
When that was posed to me recently, I was thinking I didn't like how negative it was. Yeah. And I do agree, like you said, that there's things that you wish I did that a bit more, I wish I did that a bit more. But in the spirit of, if I'm a student walking into year 12, I think having the mindset of not everything's my fault, but everything's kind of my responsibility. And taking that more positive mindset of, I have a responsibility to spend time with my family. That's a joy, and that's something I really want to prioritize. I have a responsibility to make sure that I can prioritize time for study, prioritize time for exercise, extracurriculars, musicals, music, whatever it is that you're interested in. And I think that having just that tiny mindset switch, that it's actually a real pleasure to be in year 12, have that opportunity, like you said, get involved in as much as possible, really try and walk out of year 12, go, yeah, there were some things I wish I did differently. There were some results maybe that weren't quite as good, but overall I feel like yeah, I got the most out of that. I had the responsibility there, and that was really good. So overall, if we were to just kind of wrap up the conversation around Year 12, including the self-care and everything that went into that, is there one overarching tip that you might offer to students who are, say, taking up maybe Year 11 or Year 12 or just at that kind of stage of life?
I think the biggest tip is sort of when you kind of come to the end of like Year 12 and Year 11, I guess. When you look back, I think what you remember isn't necessarily that SAC you did or the exam you did. It's more so what you did for yourself. So, the time you spent with like your family and friends or something you got involved in. So as much as possible, try to balance both. So, you do want to be happy with your grades and everything at the end of the day, but also I think those grades don't necessarily come if you are like solely focused on your studies as well. I think just kind of finding your own balance. For some people, it'll be more towards the social side, more towards the academic side, but kind of setting your goal and then working around that so that you look after yourself, but also work in a way that you're happy with the end result. So it's probably my biggest tip. Yeah.
Excellent. Are you familiar with the triangle of you can only have two out of the social life, sleep, and good grades? Have you seen that before?
I've heard of it, yeah.
How true do you think that is?
I think, yeah, for to an extent.
Yep.
But I think sleep was one thing that I consistently got in Year 12, okay. Believe it or not. I think I tried as much as possible to, be in bed so that I, next day I'd stay awake at school. Otherwise, I'm someone, if I don't get my sleep, I can't function the next day. So I realized, okay, that's a big priority for me. But I think for me, yeah, the social life probably aspect of it was what I couldn't get enough of because of the distance to school. All my friends are all around Melbourne, not necessarily in my area. So that's probably, partly true, yeah.
It is interesting. I don't think it's an absolute, like you said, but there's definitely going to be something that takes a bit of a hit depending on what you focus on. And of course, focusing on academics and with a great sleep schedule, then, of course, the travel time as well, that does massively impact the social life and everything. I do think it should be a bit more complex than a triangle, some other factors, but it's a good analogy nonetheless. Now, we've already spoken through the UCAT and I'm sure that balancing that in the study habit sense with all of your work. Did you do it sort of July, earlier?
Yeah, from memory, I did towards the start of July, around second week of July.
So was that the end of term 2?
I remember we had the holidays and the week after the holidays. Ideally, I wanted to get at the end of the holidays, but that's peak time. Everyone was logging in, booking that time straight away. And I got a time, I think, a Thursday or Friday the week after. So it was pretty good. I didn't want to leave it till August and kind of make my VC subjects kind of take a back seat. So tried as much as possible to get it out of the way.
Well, so I was really curious about that holiday period actually, because that 2 weeks I think is a great opportunity for you to let the SACs go and go, let's focus on the UCAT. So what did that 2 weeks look like for you?
Yeah, I think those 2 weeks was when most of the preparation actually happened. I remember my mum works in the city, so most of the time I would go with her to the city at Melbourne Uni. They have the computers there.
Yep.
So I would pretty much do a mock a day as much as possible. I would come home with my dad and then review the mock at home. So that's what I did most of the days. I would try to do a mock a day, and then you can't really not review it. So I had to come home, and then depending on how I did and depending on the energy I had for that day, I would try potentially doing a few mini mocks, things like that. But definitely I think that period, the 2 weeks there, did give me some form of a boost. But I remember the whole time there wasn't a day I scored past 3,000. So that was quite stressful. I thought, okay, so I spent so much time on it. I haven't really looked at my VCE, so I don't know what I was doing with myself. But I was glad it worked out in the end. But yeah, I think those 2 weeks are super, super important for sure.
So you said that was it just the 2 weeks that you didn't actually see a 3,000 plus score, or was the whole process? The whole process. So you jump from under 3,000 to on the day.
Yep.
Okay, so what happened there? Was it just sort of a
Honestly, I was surprised.
Yeah.
I remember opening the results, and my parents were like fully like ready to be like, "It's okay, it's okay." But we were all surprised. We're like,
happy,
"Oh,
yeah, yeah.
okay." I was very close. I was getting like the week before, I was getting like 2,900s. I was getting so close to the 3,000 mark, but just not hitting it or going over it, which is quite disappointing. But I
big
think,
jump still.
yeah, I think
100.
that in itself was in a form of motivation. So like I really got into the zone before the exam, the stress management, that sort of thing. So in the end, it worked out. Even I was a little bit surprised, I can't lie. But I'm glad it did, yeah.
Yeah, well, good surprise. Now, of course, walking out of the UCAT was such a great result, and particularly one that surprised you in a great way, is really awesome. And I think that I'm really interested to hear what your advice might be for a student who's walking out of that UCAT and not feeling particularly encouraged, or might feel like that score, oh my goodness, my med dream's over, like dentistry, I can't do it anymore. What advice would you give to that student?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the more situation I planned for from home. So I think walking out of the exam, the results do come quite quickly. I think like on the car ride home, it came and it was really scary. I didn't want to open it, but it's something you have to face. So if you're not feeling particularly happy about your results, I think the main thing to notice there is it's not necessarily the end of your med or dent dreams. There's so many other pathways to get in. If you can maximize your ATAR, there could be a chance as well. But other than that, just trying your best with the ATAR. I think it's quite a difficult thing to get back up from your UCAT and go, okay, now I have to focus on the rest of my VC or the rest of my ATAR. So just focusing on the rest of the year, making the most out of it, and then if you get med, well, that's amazing. But if you don't, then just thinking about other ways as well. So that's probably the main thing, yeah.
If you had walked out of your UCAT and it was too low, or too low for an offer, let's say, and your offer in Queensland didn't work out, would you have considered a gap year to retake the UCAT as an option?
Honestly, with how my whole UCAT experience went, with the ups and downs of it, I wasn't really sure about a gap year. So I did want to maximize my ATAR so I could have that option. But even then, I think if the CQ offer wouldn't have come, I would have still gone in some sort of degree like science or something, just so I have that security of being in a degree. I really don't like the idea of spending a whole year and then leaving it all for one day of the UCAT. I think potentially if you have a really high ATAR, this is what I say to like the motivation students as well. If you have quite a high ATAR and like the high 99s, it could be a really good option, but you just do have to be willing to take that risk. And I think in my case, I just didn't want to take the risk. But if you're up for it, I think it could be a good option, yeah.
It's also that you've got to kind of find something else to do with your time, whether it's just working or I suppose you could still do science or biomed and do the UCAT
You can.
again.
Yeah.
So that's also an option. Now, you mentioned as well that you, in the end, applied to Monash and, of course, to Queensland. Did you apply anywhere else for med school?
I did apply to most of the states, but the thing with interstate is the cutoffs are quite high. So I was lucky enough to get a CQ interview offer, but pretty much everywhere else the cutoff was above 3,200, quite high. So yeah, those are the two interview offers I did.
Okay. And with those two interviews, what was your experience of those? Were they both MMIs?
They were both MMIs, yeah. Initially, I wasn't really planning on going to CQ, so it was more meant to be like a practice run, just to see how the interview feels. I remember I got the interview offer and I told my parents, I'm never going to go, but I'll do the interview. And they're like, yeah, that's okay, just do the interview. And that interview was quite early on as well. That one was around mid to end of November, whereas the Monash one was more early December. So I didn't actually have too much preparation going into it. I kind of freestyled to see how it went, and it wasn't too bad. The interviewer seemed, quite happy. It was all good. And then for the Monash one, that was more my target, so I did a lot of preparation. So that was pretty good. And I came out of it feeling, quite happy. Everything went okay, but, maybe what I thought wasn't quite what had happened. So in the end, the offers came switched, but I think I'm happy with any offer as long as it was med, so I took it, yeah.
Great. So with those two interviews, of course, they were at different stages, and one of them being in mid-November means the special exam would have been like early.
Chemistry was the last
Chemistry was the last one. That would have been early November, so you would have had a very, very tight window there, and I can see why that would have felt like a trial run. And then first round for Monash would be sort of early December.
Yeah,
so
first week.
A little bit longer. And you went through the Contour interview program. So what was your experience of that?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really good. It set me up really well for my interviews. So the CQ one was partway through the program, and then the Monash one was at the end. I got a lot of confidence out of it. I told you I hadn't done much like public speaking, extracurriculars in that way. But I remember like going through the program, the confidence I got was really, really good. Being able to do the mock interviews, being able to see some of the scenarios and things like that. I think it trained me up really well. So, yeah.
Did you find that it was helpful being in an environment with other people as well? I feel like the MMI tends to be quite an isolated preparation, at least in my experience it was. Like I mentioned earlier, there was a couple of friends who were doing the UCAT that I knew of, and we kind of talked about the MMI. I think my school hosted one kind of intro event to it, but it was kind of figuring it out on my own, and a lot of the things was looking up a program, seeing if it was something that I wanted to do. But did you find it helpful being in a room full of like-minded people, or a room sort of online?
I think so, because the interviews happen like after school's finished, so you don't even get to like speak to your school friends about it. And for a lot of my school friends, they weren't too happy with the UCAT performance, so the MMI was something that I didn't really know many others who were preparing for it, especially the Monash one. So it really helped to be on the Zoom call. We would get put into like those breakout rooms where you'd actually meet people. And some of the like people I work with at Contour now, I actually met during the Contour MMI program, which is really cool, and like the connections you build out of that is pretty good as well. So it's like a good environment to be in.
And of course, the Contour program would be really helpful, like you said, with your confidence. But was there anything outside of the Contour program that you yourself did that you found really, really helpful in preparing for both of those interviews?
I generally watched a lot of YouTube videos. There's quite a few out there about the MMIs, what to expect. So I definitely did a lot of that. And then I practiced a lot. Like I would get my mom to ask me the questions and I would respond. And then just little things like that, practicing by myself. So a combination of everything, is what I did.
Okay. And having a Ramod, I suppose Ramod would be the tutor at the time, having some advice there that he himself could give you, was there anything that in particular, now being on the other side of the MMIs, having succeeded in both and getting an offer for Queensland, of course, that you would now offer some students who are thinking about med, who are potentially, of course, not taking the MMI at the moment, but maybe at the end of this year?
I think the main thing I remember Ramod saying to me was like, the UCAT's over now, the ATAR's over, the interview's a fun part, and honestly it was. If you can make the interview a fun experience, it definitely can be. You're just answering a few questions, it's about a random scenario, it doesn't really matter, there's no right or wrong answer. So I think that's exactly what I made out of the experience. I just thought, just a fun little experience to answer a few questions. And I think if you look at it that way, rather than it being an assessment, a scary exam sort of thing, I think it works out to be a lot better. And the experience, you look back on it and thought, it's really fun. Like, if I could go back through it, I probably would. It's pretty fun, I think, for the interviews process,
At any point, though, did that kind of stress that you have around the UCAT, the fact that, it's a third of my application is the same as the ATAR, did that ever sink in at all with the interviews, or was it just a bit light on?
For the most part, I thought UCAT and ATAR was a little bit more important than the interview. So by that point, I thought, okay, the UCAT had gone okay, and my VC exams, I wasn't too happy, but I was like, it's gone okay. So I thought, the interview's all that's left. So in a way, I potentially didn't take it seriously enough. It's 1/3, but I think if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, if you do pretty well, you do tend to get an offer at the end. So I was more so focused on, I think, the academic side of things, but it did get to me at times, especially on the exam, like the interview day. It gets to you. You're sitting in that waiting room, and you're like, okay, this is it. This is my chance. But before that, not really. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting, the MMI especially, and I've seen a lot of it in the last couple of months, being sort of working in the MMI program too. That's just wrapping up now, or has already wrapped up, and seeing everyone has their strengths. And I think that the MMI of all of the different aspects of medical entry is the most personal, and you're not hiding behind a page, you're not sitting behind a computer screen doing the UCAT. Like, it's you and your energy and your emotion and your character and things are shining through. And I think that it is an excellent part of medical entry overall, that the interview has been added. But it's really interesting to see the spectrum from, some people will see it as a massive, oh my goodness, this is going to be my downfall because I'm really confident with the UCAT, really confident with the academics, but I don't feel as comfortable with the interview space and the public speaking. But others, like myself, I was really looking forward to the interview, and I said, well, if I can get myself an interview, I think this is something that I'll perform quite well in, because I felt quite comfortable in that space and had some experience doing so. Where did you sort of feel in when those offers came out for the MMI, along that spectrum of, oh my goodness, I'm doomed, to this is going to be the best thing ever? Where did you sort of feel you fell? And then as a follow-up to that, in the end, when you were on your interview day, where did you feel you were?
I think when the offers initially came out, I was somewhere in between. I had a fear that, I hadn't done much like public speaking things, so I was a bit scared to speak on a Zoom call. And it's sort of like, revealing the person behind the grades in a way. So it was a little bit scary, but also I thought, okay, the scenarios, I had a look at the scenarios towards the end of the exam period, and I thought they look pretty interesting to go through. So I think after I started preparation, I realized, timing and everything is a little bit difficult. Hand gestures, looking at the screen, there's just so much to think about. But in the end, I think after I had done the CQ interview as well, I thought, it's actually not too bad. Nothing to stress about too much. It's just the person at the other end of the screen, they're just pretty much just judging how much you had to say and what you had to say, nothing wrong or right. So Monash's interview, I think, was a little bit more scary for me because it felt like there was a lot at stake there. It's like that or nothing. And back then, that's what it felt like. So somewhere in between, I think, yeah.
Okay. One of the interesting discussions we've been having in that sort of interview program was very much like what you said. It's just another person on the other side of the screen. But one of the privileges of the way that the MMI is formatted, as opposed to, if I walk into a room and I have a panel interview, it's the same interviewers for the whole time. But the MMI is generally, you'll be getting a mixture and you'll be changing interviewers each time. And that's really great because you can have one station that's an absolute catastrophe, and the next one, that interviewer has no idea how you did on that last station. And you can make a really good first impression, you can make a good impact, and you can show off your character for the first time 6, 8, however many station times, which is, really, really good. And I think it's important for any students who are thinking about the MMI to remember that it is, you're showing off the bits that you haven't done. You've done the academic bits, you've done the numbers, but now you can really come into your own and try and show why you'd be a good medical student, good dentist, good doctor, all that sort of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Sithuli, to finish our discussion for today, we've had some really great chats about, your experience through high school, the MMI, UCAT, all that med preparation stuff. I'm just really interested to hear what it is you're looking forward to most going forward in the next year, in the next couple of years. What are you most excited for?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about. So I've got 2 more years left of my medical science degree. So I'm excited to go into the UQ Doctor of Medicine as well. But I think from something more recent, I'm also just looking forward to going back to Bundaberg. I've been in Melbourne for a few months now. So going back, settling in, and then starting uni again. This year, I think uni will be not too difficult. A lot of content, a lot more content focused. But in third year, I'll have more opportunities to do hospital placements and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. Just a lot more hands-on experience. I think that's the good part of being regional as well. We get to be, in a lot more of those environments, which is really, really good. Speaking to a lot of doctors, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I'd be really interested to ask you, sort of, if I was to speak to you a year or two from now down the track, would you recommend rural healthcare, rural placement to students? But I hope it's a really, really good experience. And if there's one final thing that you would like to leave, the students with for today, one final piece of advice, one final remark or something, Is there anything you'd like to leave?
I think as a general sort of piece of advice, it's just like if you're someone who's interested in medicine or dentistry, as I said before, there's so many different ways of getting there. So if you're genuinely interested, I think don't let one thing kind of set you back. It's like a roller coaster ride in a way. There's so many ups and downs. So the main thing is kind of focusing on your goals. So throughout the whole of year 11 and 12, I knew that was my end goal that I wanted to get to. So I'd really encourage anyone who's sort of having the same sort of passions to really go towards your goal. Don't kind of settle for something else or like think, oh, I'm not good enough, that sort of thing. With med, that tends to be how you feel quite a lot of the time. So just know that, you deserve it and there's definitely a pathway to get there. So just putting in all the hard work and it'll be worth it.
It's an outstanding piece of advice. And thank you so much as well for coming in today. We had a really, really great discussion. So thank you very, very much. I'm sure that everyone will get a lot out of this as well.
Thank you.